Hi all and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Brendan O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight, brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Today, Royal Ascot takes centre stage with a strong Australian involvement on the track and in the sales ring. We chat with Darley's Arvin Chardee about the impact of the famous carnival on the global breeding landscape. We reflect on the most influential Australians in a global bloodstock context. We talk about the on-again, off-again merger between the VRC and MRC, debate who might be Australia's champion 2-year-old this year. And in wagering, we look at the trifecta Gillian McLachlan is trying to land at Tab, as well as the ongoing fight for PointsBet. Tim, great to have you with us again. Obviously a big week for Royal Ascot. It does take centre stage, probably a time of year where we're happy to look elsewhere in Australia. I mean, the local racing's fine, but it's not quite the same calibre as it is probably a couple of months ago. But it's always a big week, a particularly important day for Australian connections and a particularly important day for OTI and Terry Henderson and the investment they've put in across the board with the victory of Docklands and the Queen Anne.
I think Royal Ascot's one of those meetings where it's worth getting up or staying up for and watching, where for the great racing around the world, but sometimes sleep's more and takes priority, but where Royal Ascot, just something about it, the allure of it, of staying up and watching it, some great horses, just the pomp and pageantry of it, and obviously a lot of Australians and New Zealanders are over there, and Terry Henderson and OTI has been at the forefront of that for a long time, buying horses out of Europe, and they had great success on the first night, the opening race of the whole meeting with Docklands, a half brother to Harbour Views, that they had great success in Victoria with Matt Williams. So it just shows you that they didn't pay a lot of money for that horse. I think it was 16,000 guineas. So tremendous result for them. And I heard Terry and other media say it's the pinnacle of his racing life, perhaps. Just shows what it means to people and his owners, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, that's an outstanding result. And obviously, Terry's had a lot of horses named after Australian towns and stuff over the years. Docklands has maybe not been one of the more famous ones or celebrated ones, but it certainly is for OTI, because that's where their offices are based in Melbourne. So I worked in Docklands for a good decade of my life. It's not a place I particularly want to go back to in a hurry, but clearly they hold strong memories of the place. And it's to have a horse like that win a Greek run race. And if you ever look back through the winners of that race, it's been an awesome race over the years. I was going right back to, the 1965 winner, Showdown, who, I was reading a story that Tommy Smith was there, and famous TJ Smith, and saw Showdown and recommended that he should come to Australia to start, which he did, and became a huge influence at starting in Australia. So it's a highly influential race over the years, and terrific win. And a great advertisement for Mark Zahra. Like, I suppose it wasn't Mark's best race. The horse missed a kick and then he dropped the whip halfway through the race, but he's such a strong rider, and probably, we recognise in Australia what a great rider Mark Zahra is, but he doesn't have the international profile of other Australian riders like Zach Purton or Kiwi-born James McDonald. But he's a remarkable rider, and the picture on the front of the straight the other day of him pushing out that horse to the line, he doesn't get the international credit he deserves, that's for sure.
Well, he doesn't panic. That's probably how he was able to give Docklands that best chance, despite dropping the whip and missing the start. That he doesn't panic. He seems fairly unflappable. He likes a good time. He works hard, but he doesn't, certainly the grind of week to week, he'll chase good rides rather than making wages by going to, 5 and 6 meetings a week. That doesn't seem to be his model. He likes to, chase the better rides and ride the big carnival days, and that's why he was riding at Royal Ascot, just to part for an experience, I think, and then continue his European holiday. So he got the job done, and he seemed justifiably extremely excited by it and proud of what he'd achieved, and maybe that'll open up more doors to other international riding engagements.
And as for finished 5th in the King Charles Stakes, which it was a good effort. It wasn't quite the heroic result of last year, but she's clearly got a lot more to come, Tim, through. And I think, the way that they've planned this campaign, they probably know that if they get it right in the next couple of starts, they're probably going to pick up a couple of really important Group 1 sprint races over the British summer.
Yeah, I thought she ran well, and listening to Henry Dwyer, that he was very happy with the last year. Of course, she ran at Haydock before Royal Ascot, and she sort of peaked on a run at Haydock, and she did a little bit on Tuesday night or Tuesday. That's and I've listened to some audio from the jockey Ciaron Maher, who said the same thing. He had to use her up a bit earlier than he would have wanted to, and on the wrong side of the track. So I think she'll come on. I think she's having a 2-week sort of freshen up now, and it'll go to all roads lead to Goodwood in August 1. I think the race is. So Henry's certainly making the most of it and mapping out an extended summer European summer carnival for her.
Yeah, it's a great experience. And, other significant, I guess, connections for Australia at Royal Ascot this week. We'll get to talk to Arvin Chardee in a minute about, Darley successes and Godolphin successes over the day two. But day one, we saw Gustard, a son of Star Spangled Banner, just absolutely dominate. It looks like a future star, and the form was backed up on the second day as well. And we also saw Field of Gold, just an extraordinarily powerful win, and showed himself as the best 3-year-old miler in Europe by a long way. His dam is a half sister to Poisson's Delune. And of course, Field of Gold, your son of Kingman, who won that race, I think 11 years ago. But the grey that keeps coming through in that family, we of course got fond memories of Poisson's Delune as a favourite for a Melbourne Cup and won a couple of Group 2 races, and still continue his legacy at stud. So I mean, this global bloodstock connection just sort of continues. When you watch Royal Ascot, you can't not be taken in by the significance of it, can you, Tim?
Absolutely not. And Van Dijk's a half Arrowfield sort of got a bit of a boost there with their first season shuttle stallion Van Dijk. So half to the Coventry winner as well.
Yep.
As you said, I watched that race live, and it sort of made you stand up and take notice of the way he won that race, the 2-year-old. And I think breeding is, been a great mare. I think the breeder only paid £800 for the mare and produced multiple stakes winners now. Quite remarkable. I think bred in Wales. So great result. Sold that Star Spangled Banner, I think 420,000 guineas to MV Magna, and they kept him to race. And perhaps he'll be on the Coolmore Australia roster in 2 or 3 years, shuttling down, continue the Star Spangled Banner line. He's not coming shuttling back this year, so maybe he's the future.
Yeah, Star Spangled Banner out of Exceed and Excel Mare, so plenty to like there from an Australian pedigree perspective. And joining us now is Arvin Chardee, from Nomination Manager at Darley, New South Wales Nominations Manager. Arvin, thanks for joining us. It's good to be able to chat about Royal Ascot. It's a special time of year, isn't it?
No, thanks for having me, Tim and Brent. No, it's an amazing year. Royal Ascot is one of the highlights of the British fat season. I'm sorry, one of the highlights of the world racing fat season. It's iconic all the way from, England, where it's hosted, the Irish runners, the French runners, and now with the influx of so many Australian horses who have been imported out the race, who have gone over there to plunder some great prizes, like Aspura last year, Nature Trip in the past. It's iconic globally, and it's just a privilege to be able to work for Darley, who either have representation through the stallions or runners through the Godolphin racing team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we know that it's huge from a racing perspective. We've known that for many years, but you look back through those honour rolls of the horses that have won those races over the years, and it is an enormous, precursor or sort of window into the future of the bloodstock world, isn't it?
Absolutely. This term stallion making races banded about quite a bit, and I feel bad for using it, but there's many a race on the across the 5 days at Royal Ascot, whether it's the Coventry for 2-year-olds, or the Queen Anne over the mile, the St James's Palace for the 3-year-olds. They're iconic races that does set up any colt that wins it for a future at a stud.
There was a replay, Arvin, of the 2011 Queen Anne that Frankel won. Came up on the Sky the other day, and there was some familiar names, and Frankel obviously won it. It was one of the races where he nearly got beaten. There was a huge pacemaker, of course, and he ran it down. Zoffany ran second. Acceleration was third. Dream Ahead was in it, and then Wootton Bassett ran seventh. It just shows some years, the influence, as Brent sort of touched on, the influence that certain races or horses just emerge from, they might have got beaten, but as we said, Wootton Bassett, what he's doing all over the world now is phenomenal.
No, absolutely. That year, St. James's Palace was like you say, truly iconic. It's a fantastic race, and like you say, you've got proven stallions that effectively bookend the race. Frankel winning it and Wootton Bassett just about failing, but it's incredible the depth and the quality you must have to even take a start in some of these Royal Ascot races.
Even last night, let's touch on last night. Some success, I guess, for Team Blue. Godolphin, Ombudsman, Son of Knight of Thunder won the Prince of Wales Stakes. That must have been exciting and worth staying up for.
No, absolutely. It was amazing what happened overnight, Tim. Of the 7 races, of the 7 winners, 4 of them were by Darley stallions internationally. As you touched on, Knight of Thunders, Ombudsman won the Group 1 Prince of Wales. A fantastic race, a brilliant performance. He was underrated going into the race. They didn't, he was 8-1. They didn't really give him much of a chance, but he was unbeaten as a 3-year-old. Second in his first start of 4, and he should have commanded a lot more respect. He's a very exciting horse going forward, and obviously by a great shuttle stallion of the past in Knight of Thunder, whose first Group 1 winner was here in Australia. So it's amazing. But then you look at some of the other races. Blue Point had a double with Misinformation winning the Kensington Palace Stakes, and then My Cloud, who was a half brother to another Darley Shuttle and Palace Pier on the Royal Hunt Cup. The one I thought was pretty incredible was the filly, though. Crimson Advocate, who's by a great stallion from the Darley US team in Nyquist. She won the Group 2 Duke of Cambridge Stakes, and that was her second Royal Ascot win, having previously won the Queen Mary as a 2-year-old. So Darley stallions littered everywhere, whether they're from England, Ireland, the US, Australia. It's amazing the influence the Darley stallions have.
Yeah, I was going to sort of touch on the Knight of Thunder. Obviously, we saw him out here for a couple of seasons early on in his career, and obviously retained in the overseas from there. But he's had a remarkable year, and his record in Australia with the horses that he did have out of Australia was second to none. And probably from that point of view, from you guys' point of view, it's a good sign of the strength of that Dabawi line and the other Dabawi stallions that you bring out here year in, year out.
Absolutely, Bryn. I must say it's quite extraordinary what Dabawi has achieved as a sire of sires. He's a champion sire in Britain. He's obviously a fantastic sire, but it's not a given or foregone conclusion that a champion stallion will leave great sons at stud. Dabawi, the list goes on. Too Darn Hot, Knight of Thunder, the Aga Khan has Zarak, and Bally Lynch has New Bay. Just these phenomenal sons of stud, and we're very, very fortunate that we stand him and we have a lot of access to a lot of his good current sons, such as JF, who's coming up really, really strongly with his first crop of 3-year-olds, and then in the future you're going to look at other sons of Dabawi who would potentially retire.
Yeah, it was interesting you said before about, like, you can't take for granted that champion sires are going to produce champion sire sons. And it was interesting looking at a tweet that I saw the other day from Japan saying that there hasn't been a Group 1 winner in the Japanese JRA circuit with deep impact in the pedigree since April last year. Now, you would think, given how dominant Deep Impact would be, that it'd be logical that his sons flow through. But if you look through the Japanese side table, there's probably 3 in the top 30, including Kazuda's on top at the moment. But there's no guarantee that you're going to get those type of things. A story I did the other day about Zabeel talking about he's had some, obviously Zabeel an enormous influence, and his grandson Monroe, and through those sort of types of things. But there's no guarantee that these sires who have dominated are going to have this ongoing influence. So when you get I guess a generational sire, and one that can shape 20, 30, 40, 50 years of bloodstock, they're so rare, aren't they? It's little wonder they're so highly coveted.
Absolutely, it's one of the biggest challenges. We even just becoming a good stallion is so hard, but then a good stallion producing a successful summit stud it's even harder. The failure rate is far higher than the success rate. But Dabawi evidently is the exception to the rule, because we look, how well Gayef has gone with his first 3-year-olds this year. And then you look at Space Blues, who stands at Darley Kildangan. He's had 3 winners, individual 2-year-old winners already. It just seems to continue. And, too darn hot. I think the superlatives for that stallion has almost run out, but he's also in the very infancy of his stallion career. But, he's achieved so much in such a short space of time that he's already proven he's already the next Dubawi.
Yeah, Arvin, observer, Australian bred Godolphin horse, or 2-year-old, odds on favourite at Flemington Saturday, looks very progressive. Obviously, sort of it's only winter at the moment, but you'd think at 3 he's going to be, whoever's lucky enough to get to train him next season for Godolphin will have a lot of fun with him.
Absolutely. He was mightily impressive on his last start. He was just so fluid in his action. He did it so easily, ears pricked after the line. There was plenty left in the tank. He put up a really, really strong performance, and he looks, you don't want to put the horse before the cart, but he looks pretty special and a very smart horse. Exactly what we expected from the Gayefs, back end 2-year-olds with a very, very bright 3-year-old future, which is exactly what we're seeing in Europe with his first 3-year-olds running in the Northern Hemisphere. Opera Ballo was very impressive in winning the listed Heron Stakes. Just to add in another stakes winner for Gayef. It's just he was a very good 2-year-old, but they're going to be later 2-year-olds, and then they're going to be elite 3-year-olds, and that's exactly the trajectory we believe Observer will follow here in Australia and many other of Gayef stock.
Just digging back into Royal Ascot for a minute, and I mean, I know that you guys are trying to, when you're trying to repitch your marketing messages and work out, what you're talking to people about and what you're putting out there. I mean, 2 things. How much luster does a Royal Ascot win add to a stallion, as a racehorse, when they're racing, but also how much, luster does it add to a stallion? A Blue Point example, when you get multiple winners and whatever else. Yeah, to cut through that global market from having, be able to show that vision and be able to show proof in the biggest stage of a race, on a stage like Royal Ascot. What did that do you feel, Arvin, to a stallion's ability to be marketed and to be, and then obviously marketing then, by logic would help success, won't it?
Well, a short answer there, Bryn. It makes my job a lot easier. Like we touched on previously, it's so international, Royal Ascot. You've got everyone watching from across the world, that a winner there really just sets up a stallion. Stallions that we've had that have won at Royal Ascot, Pinatubo as an example, who broke the track record as a 2-year-old in the Chesham Stakes. His first year here in Australia, fully booked. It was more of a challenge to get into the stallion. You were saying no more than you were letting people in. Such was his popularity because of, amongst other things, but what he did here at Royal Ascot. Brazen Beau, on the reverse, he ran second in the Jubilee 10 years ago, and that fine performance when he raced alone stand side, that allowed him to become a shuttle stallion, where he reverse shuttled to the Northern Hemisphere, and that was a great success for Darley in Europe, because he obviously left the Riddler, who won the Group 2 Norfolk Stakes at Royal Ascot, and that only further elevated Brazen Beau's reputation. And he's got this very consistent The Dream running in the Wokingham on Saturday, she's a fantastic mare for Brazen. So to answer your question, just a winner there as a racehorse, makes it, you're so well received by the market. You're oversubscribed by the breeders because it's such an important carnival. And then as a stallion, if you're able to secure a winner there, it just elevates you to another stratosphere in terms of a stallion prospect.
There's a lot of Aussies and Kiwis over there. It seems, I'm not sure who's back running the farms. A lot of good staff, obviously, haven't got leave, but there seems to be a lot of people at Royal Ascot. How important, like a Starlust that's coming to Riverstone Lodge, ran very, very well, I thought, in the King Charles as it is now, ran 4th, to for the Aussies to be able to see that horse in the flesh, maybe it was sort of out of sight, out of mind, and a Breeders' Cup sort of horse or son of Zoostar, to see him in the flesh, go, actually, he's a nice horse, I might send him a mare. Is that part of the, I guess, important sort of marketing of Royal Ascot, I guess?
Absolutely. If you're fortunate enough to be able to get to go, you have to go to the parade ring. You must have a look at the horses, because every horse in that parade ring, whether they win the race or finish last, are elite athletes. Just to be able to be entered up and take a starting place at Royal Ascot, it's so competitive, and not just competitive in Britain. You've got the best horses in France, in Ireland. You've got champions, Group 1 winners like Starlust in America, Carl Spackler in America. Then you've got Group 1 winners in Australia, like Nature Strip, who like Caviar, who've made their way down. So it's the Olympic Games. So if you are fortunate enough to be there, it's highly encouraged for you to go and have a look at these horses, because they're the very best of the best. And yeah, if you're a stallion prospect running there and lucky enough to get your head in front of the line, it's a different story completely for you moving forward.
I mean, it's
Thanks
interesting
very
you say that.
much,
I was
Arvin.
going to say, just finally, Arvin, it's interesting you say that about being the best of the best. Probably the other aspect around that is who's involved in these horses. We've seen Watton Racing had a great week this week. They've had 3 winners. We've seen the big players, Coolmore. We see Godolphin having winners. We see all these major players around the world. We had Yulong have a runner, all that type of stuff. It's just the world these days, isn't it? This global bloodstock world. You talk about it being like the Olympics of horse racing. Well, it's almost like an Olympics of horse racing connections as well. And it is interesting. We're in a world at this stage where there's significant new investment coming in. Obviously, Godolphin / Darley, who've been around for a very long time, and Coolmore have been around for a long time, and a lot of these other big players we see like Juddmont and all these people. But it is fascinating to see the amount of new investment coming into global racing and what that may mean, and I guess the desire of people like John Stewart and these guys to compete on those bigger stages like Royal Ascot.
Absolutely brilliant. And I think Royal Ascot is pivotal in enticing people to invest in the industry. You go there as a fan just to have experience Royal Ascot. It really just incentivizes you to take that next step, which is be an investor, be an owner, have a share in a horse, or if you're fortunate enough, like Waffnan or John Stewart, be able to have an army to take to Royal Ascot. Having a runner there is the pinnacle. And that's what people go to. Every time you buy a racehorse, you're thinking, I want to be able to have a runner at Royal Ascot. I'm trying to buy this horse so I could go to Royal Ascot with a live chance. And that's what the allure is for a lot of these people, which is fantastic. We need more of that feeling. We need to be able to replicate Royal Ascot. So more people are incentivized to invest in our great industry, because what Royal Ascot and the Ascot Racecourse do in terms of hosting this event, looking after clients, and creating a very safe atmosphere for horses to compete at the highest level, it's pivotal to the future and betterment of horse racing going forward.
Arvin, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Cheers, Tim. Cheers, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Arvin.
Tim, we mentioned Watton Racing. I wanted to touch on that. Obviously, they've had a great week. You spoke to Ollie Tate earlier this week about Watton's growing presence, and I guess Ollie's been, not necessarily out front on this stuff. He's been working away in the background. He sort of does what he needs to do. But when we were there at the Gold Coast a couple of weeks ago, and he was bidding up to $5 million for Zigotcha, being beaten in the end by Coolmore. He hasn't confirmed that was for Watton, but every man his dog will tell you it was. It's clear that these guys, obviously funded by the Emir of Qatar, are going to be major players in global breeding and global bloodstock. And Ollie, who's obviously a really key role in Godolphin's emergence around the world, he'll be a very key part of that as well, won't he?
I was a bit tongue-in-cheek in an email earlier in the week that he could open for Australia at the moment, such as his defence and prodding away the questions. But that Ollie's so highly respected, as you touched on, worked, was in the rise of Godolphin, I guess, during, the early 2000s and through that, he's not going to say anything untoward. He's very careful in what he says and doesn't want to make big statements. And particularly, is Wathan going to have a permanent presence in Australia? Things like that certainly the Australian industry would be keen for, but he's not going to commit to that if it's not the case, or if it is, or there could be deals going on. We don't know that. That's why Ollie is so respected, because he maintains confidentiality. He's smart, intelligent, and the way he goes about building racing operations. And Wathan, well, 3 winners already, and they've had a lot of success in a short amount of time with Richard Brown from Blandford Bloodstock helping out as well, sourcing quality horses. So they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. With the backing of the Emir of Qatar, the way passionate about racing and wanting to race the best horses.
Tim, we've got a bit of breaking news here on Straight Talk, and we don't always have breaking news here. But obviously, the podcast is a bit different. But just been sent a message through by our colleague Warwick Barr that Ciaron Maher's been given this Leilani Lodge stables, which was probably not overly surprising. He was probably a front runner for it, but geez, you talk about people being all and powerful, and Ciaron's footprint on racing, Australian racing, is already pretty massive. But geez, that puts him in a good position now to have that base at Randwick, doesn't it?
Well, Ciaron was sort of favoured from the last few months, hasn't he? Believe, the stables need a bit of cash injection to upgrade them, and I think Ciaron's committed to that. And obviously the ATC board have agreed to that. I don't think as we know, ATC isn't exactly flush with cash to go and upgrade stables. So I think that was part of the selling point compared to, say, when even James Cummings applied, obviously, before Hong Kong, and Adrian Bott, I'm not quite sure what they put forward. But, Ciaron, with the backing, you obviously got Bong Bong, that's owned by Racing New South Wales. They want to grow their presence, and I think Racing New South Wales, from a wagering point of view, see that as an advantage as well. And Ciaron lives on that side of town in Sydney, so it'll help him as well with his travel commitments, which are immense as they are. So instead of going out to Warwick Farm and so forth, he'll be at Randwick.
We'll probably deal with this in a later episode, Straight Talk. It does speak a little bit about the move towards the mega stables and the concerns that have been raised across the board. Nothing gets Ciaron. He's just doing what he can for his business. But the industry does have a responsibility to ensure that there's not, just end up with 4 or 5 massive stables. And there's a bit of a query around a decision like this about what that means. But I guess in the end, if Ciaron's the man who's going to pay the right amount of money in the ATC, have got to do the deal, and so be it. There's probably a broader question there to speak about. Speaking about broader questions, obviously we spoke briefly. I spoke a bit last week about the MRC and the challenges there and departure of Tom Riley and what got on. I wrote an article yesterday about I guess the revelations about the VRC and the MRC having a meeting to discuss a possible merger and what that may look like. Now, that's no surprise to anyone who's been sort of around Victorian racing for the last 15 years. They've been talking about this for a long time, but just to have the meeting. But now it appears, from what story you wrote last week, Tim, that the VRC are very much backing away from that and aren't pursuing a merger. And it does raise the question of what actually happened and what sort of spooked the VRC on this. And there's a couple of aspects of it, as I cover in the article. One of them is the fact that perhaps that the merger is not the silver bullet that everybody thinks it is. I spoke to a source last week who described it as a bit like, Gucci and Myer trying to merge. They're both fashion brands, but they have different purposes. You got one club which holds 21 meetings a year, one which holds 80 odd meetings a year. You've got one with 3 tracks, you've got one with 1 track. It is a different sort of model, so maybe that might work. And there's probably a little bit of about this around, as I mentioned, around the quite high profile of MRC chairman John Kanga and where he sits within all this, and the various sort of factors around that. So there's a bit in play at the moment around the MRC. And I kind of feel like, as I'm putting that article, I kind of feel like the Kanga era or Kanga honeymoon is definitely over. When you start making decisions which start to move on staff or whatever else, it does change the pallor of your reign, I suppose, for want of a better word, and we'll see what happens there going forward. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Tim, but it's clear that that the MRC and the VRC are not on the same table on this idea.
No, I did enjoy your article, and as you mentioned, sources or people that have known Kanga for a lot longer than the past 12 months or 18 months. He's sort of emerged, as a racing person, I guess, referred to him as John. So it is this, as he admits himself, as two sides to Kanga, and he's done a lot of good so far. But yeah, the pressure probably does come on. Where to next? VRC, Collie Rogers is at Royal Ascot, I believe, at the moment, but she's trying to, how do they maximise Flemington 365 days a year, not just their 20-odd meetings a year, 20-odd days. So there's a lot to play out. The merger costs, if they did merge, is there as many savings as they suggest? Perhaps. Probably not. So, watch your space, I guess. With someone like Kanga, there's always something happening.
Yeah, exactly right. And back to things on the track. Well, I saw Cool Archie, fairly dominant winner, I would say, the JJ Atkins Stakes. Does he have claims to be 2-year-old of the year, Tim, is the question. He's the first 4-time stakes winning 2-year-old we've had in Australia since broadsiding, and there's only been 2 this decade, and probably, I think, 5 over the past 15 years. If you look at the other Group 1 winners in Australia, 2-year-old Group 1 winners in Australia this season, with Devil Knight, Blue Diamond, Mahuna won the Golden Slipper, Vinrock won the Size, and Nepotism won the Champagne. I'll tell you what, among that list of horses, it's hard to argue against Cool Archie being sort of right up there as a horse that probably should be considered as the best 2-year-old in the land.
I'm of that view that he, reward for consistency, ability to reproduce. He went from a maiden this Brett to a Group 1. Sure, the Slipper probably is stronger in the size, and races like that, but a lot of those horses produced it once or twice. Devil Knight winning the Blue Diamond, sort of continued to improve, but for Cool Archie to do what he did in one winter prep, quite sensationally. Yes, he raced earlier in the year, but he just continued to improve, and it's hard to knock him. And given that sire line of Cool Zabeel, Zabeel, Sir Tristram way back, you'd think if it hasn't knocked him around too much, maybe he continues to improve at 3.
Yeah, and that's the question. You sit there and go, which is the one you'd rather have as a 3-year-old? Nepotism's probably got a bit of improvement as well, but you would think that, genetically at least, that, Cool Archie would indicate he'd go on. And now he's a horse with a turn of foot and with speed, and these are the horses that tend to go on and are able to sort of match it in those better 3-year-old races. And we're probably not talking about a Coolmore Stud Stakes, but certainly Caulfield Guineas and those type of races moving forward. You would indicate that he's the type of horse that could, be up and about amongst the top few horses in those races.
There's Vinrock's only had, I think, 2 or 3 starts, and they didn't go to the Champagne after selling 2 year long. Got the Group 1. Again, Biome Invincible, the consensus is they're better at 3-year-olds and dry tracks, and so you'd think the spring at a Coolmore Stud Stakes, perhaps, or a Guineas, Golden Rose will be right up his alley as well. You'd think there's a lot of improvement in him, again, with pedigree-wise as well, suggests that he will. And, what Matt Laurie was sort of suggesting around the Easter sale time, that there's a lot of upside to him as well.
The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. The catalogue for Inglis's June late online sale is available this Friday. The sale will run from June 20 to June 25. Among highlight results from the last Inglis digital sale was $305,000 for Broodmare Wind Chimes and $290,000 for Ketchy Boom. Check out englishdigital.com.au. Finally, Tim, in wagering, big week in wagering. We'll get on to the breaking news or the more sort of, to and fro around PointsBet in a minute. But there's an article up there this morning, which I've written on the straight, about what Tabcorp wants to achieve this year. And if Gillian McLachlan can land these 3 pieces of the puzzle, then he's in a very good position. He's got the wind at his back at the moment. There's a bit going on. The share price is looking good. There's a bit of momentum around there. He's got his most of his executives under the desk. Michael Fitzsimons doesn't start his job until next month, but the head of wagering. But I think there's a sense that Tab was sort of going definitely right back in the right direction now. The share market would indicate that. The key around this is obviously Gil wants a national tote. He wants a new deal in New South Wales, and he wants freedom, a part of that New South Wales review, from the restrictions on shareholders and shareholder investment, which at the moment the New South Wales Racing and Gaming Minister has call over, where someone wants to invest more than 10% of Tabcorp. I think it's a really important moment for Tabcorp. They're obviously gone into this retail strategy, which we've spoken about before, but this is probably about unpicking some of the restrictions for them going backwards, some of the things that they've probably tied themselves to, particularly in the New South Wales stuff. Then the national tote is seen as an important part of that, and there's probably bits in play about taking some of the tote derivative products and feeding them back into a national tote. The shareholder stuff's more of a corporate thing, but it certainly would change Tab if they want to make some acquisitions or whatever else to be able to put in that space. It promises to be a big 6 months for Gil McLachlan. I think the report card at the end of the year, if he's able to tick off these three things, Tim, it'll put them in a very strong position.
My observations are that, previous management sort of wanted, government to support them in protecting a monopoly, well, not quite like that, but, protecting to make it harder for their competition, where I think Gil's and the new management have gone, well, that's not working. We need to change things up, and rightly or wrongly with retail and their initiatives there and the national tote, and importantly, trying to get as you say, the corporates tote turnover back into the tote pools, whether that's providing them with, well, naturally with a rebate, I would imagine, or a commission on for putting their money back through there. I think that's a good idea if they can get it over the line. This just help, government help us protect us is just not working. And I like the new initiative and the way they're looking at things seems to be heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and obviously the role of Peter V'landys will be crucial within that, given the power that Racing New South Wales holds within these discussions around the Tabcorp licence moving forward. So will be interesting. It's said at the moment that PVL and Gil are best of buddies and working through things, and we'll see how that pans out. But it's a very interesting time for Tabcorp, and puts them in an interesting position, because especially when you consider the challenges that are facing Entain, one of their key rivals. Sportsbet are still dominant, but probably got some other challenges. Tabcorp had their own challenges this week. Had a $4 million fine lobbed at them for a breach of spam legislation, and so there's a few. The compliance stuff still remains there. I want to touch sort of briefly. We've spoken about this story a bit over the last 3 months about the battle for PointsBet between Mixi and Betr. PointsBet came out on Monday. We're pretty strong at saying, look, we accept the Mixi offer. It's the one. We've rejected Betr's offer, and next Wednesday, I think it is, they all go into a meeting, and the shareholders vote about whether they accept the Mixi offer. But Mixi have also said, look, if that doesn't happen, we're happy to go to an off-market offer to make that happen. Now, I'm not au fait with all the corporate machinations and how that works, Tim, but it would seem that Mixi holds very much the upper hand on this. But I tell you what, I'll give Andrew Menz and Matt Tripp their due from Betr. They don't give up. They've come back with a very strong response, saying that they insist that their offer is actually really strong, and there's a lot of positive aspects about it. And it's caused a little bit of bad blood between the two corporates, which is understandable. If I can tell you what, if the deal doesn't get done between Betr and PointsBet, it'd be interesting to see what happens with them going forward, because I kind of feel like there's definitely a competitive, the competitive juices have got flowing between those two companies about how it's going to work. Chatting to PointsBet the other day, more on background than anything else, it would appear that Mixi are keen to retain the PointsBet brand and sort of retain the presence in Australia, and continue to build on that, utilise the expertise they get from that to take back to Japan and work in that market, which is probably going to become less regulated. I don't know if you're aware of this, Tim, but I think there's only 4 sports you can bet on in Japan. So it's that market might be ripe for deregulation over the next 5 or so years, which puts them in a good position anyway. So look, it's a little bit of a corporate story, but I think it's an interesting story about the nature of the Australian wagering environment at the moment, and the need for these players to be playing at bigger percentage levels, because it's very hard, as we've spoken to before, for the smaller bookies to make ends meet. All right, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our fabulous sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, be it on Apple, Podbean, Spotify, all the various places you can find us. I probably missed one on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube if you want. God bless you. Don't forget to send us an email. Give us a rating. Send us an email. editor@thestraight.com.au. Talk to us about what you might want to hear from, any guests you might want to hear from. And we'll speak to you again next week.